So we're going to start. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Gloria Kondra, and I'm the executive director of the Hoffmitz Milken Center for Typography. And this is the last of our series of Hello, My Name Is, presented by the HMCT and the graphic design department at Art Center College of Design. We've had two very interesting speakers before, and this is our third speaker. And I'm very pleased and personally associated, of course, with Siyun Oh. Siyun Oh is an independent graphic designer and art director who, and this is true, she's passionate about working with multiple scales of typography and image, and she'll show you what we're talking about. She likes to show the transition between, or its translation from two-dimensional design graphics into three-dimensional spaces through materiality and scale. Her work encompasses art direction, visual identity systems, exhibition design, signage, and wayfinding. In addition to her own practice and ongoing collaborations with independent architects and agencies, she was a senior designer at InfoCo, where she led the exhibition graphics, and this is more than exhibition graphics, the young, for the permanent exhibition at the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures. When you see this, everyone, you will be amazed at the scope of the project that she was able to do. I mean, just amazing. Prior to that, she also worked with Gensler, Pentagram, and MoMA. And she was my TA, I have to tell you. So I don't take any credit, none whatsoever, but I'm so pleased to introduce you to Siyun Oh. And I'm going to stop my share so she can start her share. I will disappear unless I have to say something, which I think is important about your work, but I'm going to let Siyun take over. And thank you so much for doing this. I think you're going to be a great inspiration to students, current students, graduate and undergraduate who are watching, to see what you've been able to accomplish in such a short amount of time. So I'll let you take it away, Siyun.
Thank you, Gloria. And thank you so much for the generous introduction, too. Okay, so yeah, to begin with, I would like to talk a bit about my background first, and I will walk you through my projects in a chronological order. So this is my name in Korean. It's Oh Siyun. In Korea, the last name comes first and the first name follows the last name. And then that's in English, Siyun Oh. I lived in a couple of different parts of the world, and I had to adapt to a new language and culture once in a while in my life. And yeah, it was a bit tough for me. I was born in Korea, and at the age of 3, my parents brought me to Paris to continue their studies. And so technically the first complete language that I've learned was French. And yeah, and 6 years later, at the age of 10, I went back to my home country, but I wasn't really fluent in Korean either. Now I'm in LA, and I moved to Pasadena for Art Center when I was 23 years old. I started as an international student, and again, barely spoke English at the time. So really my whole life was like, I've been struggling with verbal communication my whole life. So looking back to my journey, I think that's why I was attracted by visual communication and decided to become a graphic designer. A bit about my influences. So before Art Center, I went to a college in Seoul, and in my first year, I did a bit of ceramic, metal craft, and textile, and which influenced me to explore different materials. This is a photo that I took during a trip to Switzerland I think it was in 2011. And I never paid attention to signage before, but when I saw this, I was like blown away by seeing this juxtaposition of this bold color and bold sans serif type with this green nature. So this really changed my perspective to see the role of graphic design in an environmental space. And yeah, and I also took some transmedia classes at Art Center, which influenced me to work with cross media, like print, spatial, and screen-based media. And that's actually a photo that I took at South Campus in B3, which is also the classroom that I co-teach Type 5 class with Brad these days. Before graduating, I went to New York for 2 internships. On the left is at MoMA. It's me in front of a paper mock-up of the title wall for a community outreach project. And on the right is a photo I took at Pentagram during Pentagram. And I worked in the Hudson River Park Identity Project. And yeah, the team brought me to this on-site client meeting, and they asked me to print this 20-foot long logo on this paper so that they can test it on in context using this lift. And yeah, I was like blown away by like seeing this, because I've never thought that a graphic designer will work at that large scale. So after these 2 internships, I wanted to be a graphic designer who can work with multiple scales. So sometimes in feet and inches. And the largest scale that I worked so far was 140,000 square footage, which is the Bank of California Stadium, with the home of LAFC. And the smallest scale is 0.05 square footage, worked with points and picas, like a business card. After graduation, I applied to an architecture firm in LA called Gensler. And I also had to consider the size of the company so that they can sponsor me the work visa too. So I was with the brand design team for about like 4 years, primarily working on signage and branding for environmental space. And these are some overview of the work that I did. So yeah, like on the left, the top left corner is the most expensive restroom sign that I've ever worked on. In the middle is the Studio Black project, which I will talk more in details in a minute. On the top right is the Bank of California Stadium signage. I also worked on the VIP lounge down below that signage. And yeah, and below is I developed some identity visual system for a shopping mall in San Jose. So the first project that I want to talk about is Studio Black. It's a cork. It was the first co-working business in Korea whose target audience was those entrepreneurs and startup companies. So it's like a WeWork brand. And the scope of the work was to develop an identity system for their new brand, as well as creating spatial graphics for the space. So it's a total of 8 floors. And the client wanted to create a community-based workspace where all the startup companies and entrepreneurs can explore, innovate, and like have fun, like create some unexpected inventions of their work process. So I thought the overall like look and feel could be a bit more like process driven instead of being like too refined, and also using a lot of exposed material and feel effortless. And yeah, I took some inspiration from the office tools like a scanner or copy machine, and created this thematic texture with a copy machine, with the copy machine, and applied it to the membership card and some signage and wayfinding that is like very like process driven. This is a photo that I took during my experimentation with the scanner and the copy machine. I even like scanned my keys on the left for the membership card. Yeah, like also some custom blinds that use this shredded paper document printed on it. Also, there was this kit-apart modular system that the architect developed for the studio layout. So on the top left corner, it's a small diagram that shows the idea of like how they could like expand the studio module with this kit-apart idea. And with this modular cell concept, I transformed it to a floor tile graphics that starts from the elevator lobby, like on the plan where you see the Studio Black logo is the elevator lobby. So I tried to like create a modular pattern that leads the visitors to the reception area. So on the left is the elevator lobby, and you can see how the scale shifts, the modular scale like shifts as it goes to the reception desk. And yeah, and like a few years later, I got my green card and I was seeking for another job. And I was looking for doing more cultural projects at the time. So I applied at InfoCo, formerly Projects in New York. And these are some highlights of the work I did there. From left is the Sandy Simon Dance Center signage project. The bottom is an exhibition title at the Jewish Museum in New York. The middle is another exhibition identity project that we did for the Carnegie Museum of Art. It's an exhibition that features the work of international architects, and we were inspired by the grid from the Super Studio. And on the right is the Academy Museum project, which I have a lot to talk about in a minute. So Sandy Simon Center for Dance, it's a dance center at the Chapman University. And we worked closely with the architects, LOHA in short, to develop a signage and wayfinding system for the space. So Dance Center is located in this historical building that was built in 1918. And it's in the city of Orange in Orange County. It was built, this building was occupied by Sunkist and was used for fruit packing at the time, and Villa Park Orchard Association took it over later. So on the right is a photo that I took on site. So it's an evidence of their occupancy. And yeah, and on the parapet of the building, we wanted to keep the same treatment of the painted letters that we saw from the historical image. So we used this grotesque typeface to really like speak to that era. And because this is a historical building, there were a lot of effort to, to preserve those the structure of the building. So the two left images are the existing condition of the building inside. Like there are a lot of like structure beams and skylight windows on the ceiling. So these are all remain the same as you're seeing here in these photos. And also on the right, the architects developed this scheme mainly using a polycarbonate material, which is a translucent material that allows to transmit a lot of natural light to it. So for the graphics, I took inspirations of the grid on the ceiling because it represents really well the industrial vernacular features of the architecture. So I took the reference of the reflected ceiling plan for the architects and used it as a base for the grid of the signage. So that's the concept design that we proposed in the earlier phase. And the idea was to create a seamless signage system that works with the architecture design that was developed already. And yeah, it was like the idea of this layering with this metal grid structure behind a translucent material. And we did the same for the exterior signage using these grids and translucent layer to it. The client really liked the idea, but they felt that this is a bit like the grid is a bit too busy. So we simplified it and tested it with different opacity and color here. And yeah, the full signage system is also using this modular grid system. I mean, the modular unit system. So it's always an increment of 5.5 inch. So whenever there are more messaging that needs to be added, we increment it to keep the same, to feel consistent over on the space. This is a photo that I took at the fabricator's shop. It's like press check in book design to make sure that everything is right before the mass production. And we spent a lot of time with the fabricator to make sure that the structure behind it and the printed arrow perfectly align on the grid. So like was the small details that made the difference. We even developed the wall graphic behind this polycarbonate layer here. And we initially proposed something that is a bit more expressive, but the client wanted to be a bit more subtle and create more of an, atmospheric graphic rather than like a graphic, So we did a bunch of different scale tests of patterns using like a pointy shape stripe patterns or just a vertical shape patterns. And really we wanted to see how the printed pattern interacts with the stripes on the polycarbonate. And it created a really interesting optical illusion effect, because as you layer these two patterns, it kind of like create a subtle movement to it. So on the left is the pattern that we tested on site on the right with the layer of the polycarbonate. And yeah, I even tested the size of the letter that was painted on this perforated metal. And then next is the Academy Museum project. Stories of Cinema is the title of their permanent exhibition that highlights all the craft in movie making. So it's in 3 floors, and there are about like 20 galleries within the 3 floors. And it took us about like a year and a half to completion. And it was a very small team at Infoco. There was Brian and Kevin who were the designers with me on this project, and Shannon is the principal. Yeah, the core and shell was done by Renzo Piano, the Star Architects, and also Y Architects is another architecture firm who worked on the exhibition design with us. And for the visual system, there are some graphic elements that we used as a foundation. So first is this countdown letters. And we used GT Cinetype for the system font that has this really nice detail on the curves. It has this chamfered angle to it. And it's because the font designer was inspired by the old subtitling machine that couldn't like do the layers, that couldn't like really do a rounded cut shape at the time. We also took reference on the film strips. So we used a lot of repetition of the text and images. The 4:3 ratio, which is the official Academy ratio. And because they considered a film is art, we were not allowed to crop any of the images. So we use this letterboxing device, which is these black strips that you can see on the right image on the top and bottom, to that allowed us to blow up some images that are in a different aspect ratio. And lastly, the idea of focus and out focus was translated through this translucent material. So yeah, first we worked on this title wall of the exhibition. This is a rendering. This is a rendered view testing the type size and also the material on the space. And we wanted to see how, and there was a projection inside the gallery. So we wanted to see how the two layers work from outside of the gallery. And we did a lot of mock-up tests. On the far left, the black and white print is paper mock-up, was to see how the type size work in relation to the space. And yeah, and we tested like a bunch of different materials, like, and even like tested this gradient black background behind the letters to see how legible it is. Like tested a black, is the black type works better, or the solid white type works better? Is it better to have a white background, or is it better to have a black gradient background? And we ended up doing some cutout letters printed on a gradient. And this is a view from the inside that shows the details better, I guess. You can see the gradient better here. Also, the introductory text inside the gallery, we used a similar visual language here. And taking the similar approach, the title wall was on 3 floors. So the one that I showed you first was on the 2nd floor. And every floor had a different condition. So we had to resize it and come up with a different solution for the other title walls. And on the that's the 3rd floor with the intro text. And this is the gallery for dedicated for Pedro Almodovar, who is the director. And we did some special treatment on this gallery because his film is really like bold, and he used a lot of saturated colors as well. So even for his name, we typesetted with a different typeface that took reference to his film posters. And yeah, and from here, I want to talk about the collaborative process between the curator, editor, architect, and us. And again, we designed like about 20 galleries within the permanent exhibition, but since we are short on time today, I'll give an example with this gallery highlighted in red. It's on the 2nd floor, and it's called The Art of Movie Making. And as a case study, this gallery features a single movie, which is The Wizard of Oz. And this gallery highlights all the crafts that go into a movie. I mean, that go into making a movie. That includes from the top left, like screenwritings, casting. The middle is the production design. On the right is costume and hair makeups. The bottom left is like special effect, sound, music, editing, and executives, and even cinematography. So first, that's what we get from the curator. It's called checklist. So based on the call action, the curator shared this checklist that includes all the artifacts and images that she wants to include to tell the story on the space. And then she will work with the editor to draft a manuscript. So this manuscript will be a draft, but we will use it for creating some templates and to test all the didactics didactic sizes. So this is a didactic matrix that we determine. So for the graphic designer, we need to determine the hierarchy of the information and really like group them by the text, the type of text, information, and the sizes and materials. And it's also to give the creators some limits to work with, like the word counts, so that they don't go over a certain amount of word counts. And these are all the didactic types that we designed for the exhibition. And even a guideline for hang height, because also hang height is very important to keep the system consistent. So it's really to keep the placement of the label in the same height throughout the galleries. This is a photo I took during a meeting at the museum to review all the didactic types, and was to test the legibility and to see if the hang height is legible enough for the visitors. And then the architects will provide us an initial space layout, which displays all the artifacts from the checklist. And you can see like they started to like divide the space, like put some artifacts in the casework, but on the wall, like it felt a bit too linear to me. So for us, it's like similar to designing a book. I think the role of the graphic designer here is to like tell a narrative story throughout the space. So here what I tried was to create a more immersive experience, and we rearranged some contents to make it clear for the visitors as they walk, as they enter through the space and walk to the right, and also to bring a bit more characteristic to the gallery. So once the space layout is in a good place, we test it on a flat elevation like this, and we work at scale from here. So it's really to see if all the type sizes and images are fitting within the wall space. And that's the final installation. We like on the right, we even considered the gap between the wall and the image, so that everything is really like consistent. Yeah, and that's the ruby sleeper, which is such an iconic prop in the film. So the curator wanted to display it in the center of the gallery space. So on the left is what was proposed by the architects. And actually, this is the view that you see as you enter to this gallery. And to me, I wanted to have a stronger image a stronger image instead of having a perspective image. So I did some research and found this reproduction image from their collection, and feels like I liked it because it feels like you're walking to the Emerald City, and also like we suggested to use this to continue this yellow brick road. So at the end, we projected this yellow light on the floor. And yeah, and these are all the material tests we did. We even like selected the paint color for the walls. Did a lot of press check for every images. We did a lot of tests on vinyl, aluminum, and even on wallpapers. And these are other explorations we did. Yeah, the image behind the ruby sleeper was printed on a fabric, and we worked with the pre-press vendor to up-res the image to fit on that scale. And on the bottom left are some prototype of the images in this gallery, we tried to achieve that silver gelatin print fill. So we tested on this aluminum panel, but we didn't really like this brush texture on the left, so we ended up doing it on a matte finish. On the bottom right is an absent paper from the pre-press vendor. So we worked on like, I think like about 300 images with them to correct all the colors and to make them all consistent, have a consistent color. So that became a proof, like a quality control proof, so that to all the different materials. So once everything is approved, we sent them to the printer with this spreadsheet. We tracked about like, I don't know, like 700-800 items at the end. And with that, the fabricator will fabricate and install all the graphics in the space. And for us, we will do a final punch walk, and that's me in the gallery. And it's for checking and approving every single item from that spreadsheet. These are the final photos. And yeah, a detail of the letterboxing. So because all the films are from different era and has different aspect ratio, the letterboxing really helped to keep them all consistent. So on the left, you can see these black strips on the top and bottom of the right wall. The right image is also another graphic that we did for this editor, film editor, Thelma Schoonmaker. So this is her editing table, and we wanted to bring the process of editing a film through the graphic. Individual labels were all painted and printed the text on it. And all the wall colors were different by gallery. So what we did, we tried to match the same paint color for each label. That's the gallery intro text panel that we printed on this translucent material. And even the gold hardware on the right corner, we considered the color to be gold because that's the color of the academy. And yeah, this is to show like all the different paint colors and yeah. So yeah, at the end, we've put together a graphic standard manual that for the permanent exhibition. And it's like a brand guideline that we will hand it over to the in-house designers, in-house team, so that they could reference it for future rotation. So it was a really like broad scope, and to summarize it, we worked on 20 galleries, and at the end we created all the individual wall layouts in a drawing format. We worked on 600 labels and wall text, and we typesetted them all. And worked with the pre-press vendor for correcting 400 images. So it was a really like comprehensive project. And yeah, and last year I started my own practice after leaving InfoCo. And for the tax benefits, I opened an LLC. The name is not to scale. It's not official yet, but it's on the paper. And and these are the projects that I did over the past like 9 months. And yeah, I'm continuing to build more client relationships for more projects. And as an example, like the left images are an identity project for an architecture studio in LA. The top right is art direction for an indie band in Korea. And on the bottom is a recent project for the photography show in New York. So I have 2 more projects left here. First, I want to walk you through the identity project I did for an architecture studio based in LA. Their practice focused on exhibitions and residential projects. And when they contacted me, they had this name Oficina and also purchased this web address with .la at the end. So I suggested to include .la. The reason why they purchased .la was to attract more local clients for their projects. And I suggested to incorporate the .la to their logo so that there is also an opportunity to abbreviate it and to be called Ola in short. And for the logo mark, I was inspired by the process of architectural design. It often starts with a simple geometric form, like how I have it in this diagram. And then it's an iterative process of adding another form to it and also subtracting it. So simply, I followed the same process for the logo mark. And so with these 3 letters, I started simplifying the letters and found a geometric shape as a base. And found the opportunity to subtract a form, especially on the counter of the letter form O and A. And yeah, and at the end, I reconfigured them to work in a grid system. So there's this underlying grid of this modular grid, and to like subtracting this dot from each letter in the same underlying grid. And I did for their full name, I suggested to use it separately, not with the logo mark. So I did the same thing here. I shifted the LA to be aligned to the period, similar to the logo mark previously. And I also slightly adjusted the letter form so that it fits in the grid here. And yeah. Okay, so for applications, I wanted to give them a bit of flexibility to be, like resized and adapted to the context. Like a building on a land, they all look different because they are, they need to work on the landscape. But the rule here is to always use the same size of the subtracted form on each letter. So even though you scale a letter, the subtractive form will stay the same size. And yeah, and that was applied to the business card. We letterpressed it at Artbark. And here's the full applications. I also proposed some, some swag, like a signage for their office using this construction barricade form. And most of the time, architects need to wear a hard hat when they're on site. So there was another idea, like a fun idea. I don't think they made it, but there was another idea for them. And for the website, they didn't have budget for hiring a developer. So I built it in Cargo and tweaked the code so that all the letter spacing, like all the type settings are consistent throughout, like printed media and screen media. And this is the last project that I want to talk about. And it is still in development. So I created the identity for the photography show in New York. And that's what I've got from them. It's their brand guideline that I had to work with. It's very minimal, not much to play with besides those circular shape. So I did some research to see if there's any other elements that I can add to it. And I found this lens test chart, and thought there might be some circular shapes that I can pull from, and that will help to do something a bit more expressive with their exhibition, with their show identity. So I pulled those shapes and composed them on the exterior windows, utilizing the glass seams. So I tried to use it as a grid here. And on the sides, those gradient squares are inspired by the color chart too. And yeah, really like same idea was applied to the brochure. It's a prototype, by the way. It's a double fold brochure on a 3x4 format, which is which is the standard aspect ratio in photography. And I use these circular shapes in a simple grid format that is printed with this metallic silver spot color. So, and that's the inside of the layout. I didn't want to overuse the circular shapes here. So I introduced this scale bar on the left side. It was also included in the exterior graphic next to the dates. And using this scale bar, I tried to separate the information by reducing the scale of the bar on the left. That will also, and as it moved to the other page, it reduced the type size as well. And yeah, I think that's all I have today. That's the end of my presentation.
That's a lot.
Thank
So we
you.
have a few questions. And I have to, Milka, I love your question because I had the same question for Siyun the other day. So here's the question. Can you elaborate on the operational scale of 800 items designed for the gallery? So was there a project manager? And if not, what was the process to accomplish this production? So Milka, you're gonna not believe this. Go ahead, Siyun.
Oh my God. So as I said, we worked with a very small team. There were like 3 designers, including myself, and we had the principal in charge. We didn't have a project manager, so I was the senior designer and also the project manager of this project. And actually it was my first time managing a project, so it was a really fun experience to me. But yeah, and I've learned a lot through that process too, because everything was so new to me, but I had a good support from other vendors and other team members. So yeah.
I think this is a great example of choosing where you work based upon what experience you're going to get. And you were able to get so much experience because of this particular project that you would not have gotten maybe if you'd gone to a different firm. Sometimes the smaller firms, you get to do more where you can really hone it in. And then you go out, which is what you've done, and start your own firm. And then you have the confidence after working on the Motion Picture Academy. I mean, after doing that, working with, I think, any size firm, you feel pretty confident that any size project is not going to be difficult for you. Jamal has a few questions and we'll put it together. And I think he wants to know, what was the rationale behind using the parenthesis around the words on the site? I'm not quite sure, Jamal, what that was. And I believe that Siyun uses a grid and everything.
True, yeah. Sometimes there are not much to play with on some projects, right? And I think for graphic designers, like working with grid it's just natural to us, right? So
I don't know. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes we have to watch out, like we get a little too, we
right,
create things
yeah,
that might
yeah,
be a little too fussy, or maybe we like the way it divided the space, Jamal. You know what I mean? It's something. But I know Young always works with a grid. That's if she breaks it, that's one thing, but there's definitely a grid back there. Jonathan asked the question, and I think this is really an interesting question. If you've been able to work with clients remotely, and do you work with a lot of clients, in Korea, and have they been successful? And I'll let you answer this, but Jonathan, I think when you're working with space, actual physical space, as you saw, there was a lot of on-site
right, yeah.
designing. So are you able to work with people remotely?
Especially for the first project that I presented today, the Studio Black by Hyundai. So the site was in Seoul, Korea, and at that time I couldn't go there because I was in the process of getting my work visa, so I couldn't go outside of the state. So the other team members went to Korea to really like document every single, space and walls there. So yeah, I completely worked remotely for that project, but for the academy, I realized that like really being on site and understanding the context is really important too. But to answer your question, yes, I worked remotely for spatial projects before.
And what about the one in New York? Did you go to New York, or you did that remotely?
I did it remotely too. I mean, if the client has like big budget, they will afford me to to be there, right? But especially when it's a small scope, like what I showed you, they usually provide all the site measurement and ask us to do a lot of prototype on screen. And yeah, that's the reality.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about going from small to large, I mean, it's an interesting shift, isn't it, in how you deal with the type and how you deal with imagery. You're asked to take the same imagery and work, like you say, very small. And then I don't think students realize how difficult it is to make that adjustment. You always have to do adjustments, don't you?
Right.
When you
Yeah.
go from very, very
Especially
small.
also like even though you print everything at scale and put it on your wall to see how it feels, it's different if you test that in a space that has a higher ceiling or like a smaller ceiling. So like really, and that's why I think it's really important to be on site to test this at the end before production. But yeah.
And then someone wants to know, this is a great question. Everyone gets asked this. Where do you find your inspiration?
He's my friend, actually. Oh my God, that's a tough question. I don't know. I think I don't really look for inspiration in my everyday life. I mean, I do, but I'm not like when I don't work, I don't want to do any work, right? But I mostly find inspirations from my research, and depending on that subject matter, I really make sure that I like really absorb all the research and like know like 100% about the topic of it.
Yeah, I would assume that you visited a lot of exhibitions before you design an exhibition
Oh
at
yeah,
the
yeah, for sure.
Academy
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Museum.
Right.
I mean, you can't walk in and go, gee, I've never been to the Hammer Museum,
Oh
or I've
no,
never
no.
been to
I mean,
LACMA. I mean,
yeah,
you're designing a major exhibition space. By the way, extremely impressive,
thank you.
Young, and the detail that you had to that exhibition. And I think everyone has to understand the small amount of people who worked on this, which meant that there was so much put on your shoulders for the detailing and the organization. And I think that's the way you think, but you designed a major, wonderful, beautiful, by the way, people have to go see it, exhibition space in a major city, you know, and you have to then go see, well, what's LACMA doing? What's MoCA doing? You
Oh
know,
yeah.
what are the other museums doing?
Yeah.
You know, and they all have their own, you know, committees, I'm sure, who make a decision about, you know, did you have problems with that? Was there a lot of commentary by the client, let's say, about the work? Were there a lot of changes being made, or were they probably pretty open to what you were suggesting?
It depends on the client, but especially with this large scale project, because the timeline is a bit longer than, you know, like print based media or screen based
Right.
media, because also production is involved that takes much more time to do that. And also there's another layer of the architect, you know, like even though I work for a client, in between there's these architects who might have their own opinion too. So sorry, what was your question?
No, I was just wondering if there was a lot of changes. Did you
Oh, yeah.
find that the clients were really receptive to your concepts and your ideas?
So even though they like the ideas, and even though we proceed, like move forward with that idea during the production, there are some times when we find out that, like, for example, like this material might not work because of the longevity of the material. Then we might sometimes we have to completely change the concept because of that small, you know, detail reasons.
And I have one more question about the typeface used for the cinema, for the museum. Was that a custom design typeface, or did it exist?
No, it was an existing typeface, but I believe so. When we selected that font, I wasn't with Infoco yet, so they selected that font when
They did.
started the museum project. And yeah, but I believe they worked with GT to modify it so that it works better in a large scale type.
Great. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I don't know if there's anything you want to impart to some of the students who are still here watching before they run off to class. Any advice that now that you're about 10 years out, maybe 8 years out, what they should really focus on in terms of what you think was extremely important to your learning, the art of your craft here at Art Center? What would you say if you had to advise the students what you thought was very important to you, what you took away from Art Center?
I want to say, as a student, I mean, if I can go back to the time when I was at school as a student, I will encourage students to really explore as much as they can and make as much mistake as they can make, because in real life, sometimes those mistakes are not accepted as it is as a student. So yeah, just have fun and just explore as much as you can. Even though you think it's a stupid idea, just try it, and you might find a very interesting concept through that process.
Yeah. And I think this other question, we talked about this, about starting your own practice. It's scary to start your own practice, of course. And I think Art Center really should, I'm going to say this, I think Art Center should be a little more transparent about when you start your own practice. What does that really entail? And I mean, not be overcomplicated by it, but what is the process? Some people are very comfortable starting their own practice, and other people need, a little more time, a little more experience to start your own practice. And I think you waited a bit. You waited till you felt comfortable with your skills, especially working. I think you didn't start your own practice for quite a while, right?
Yeah, 9 months last year.
Well, you've had it for 9 months, but you've had several years of experience
Oh,
learning more.
sure.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that might answer the question. Some people are very comfortable starting a practice, and other people, you know, want to get more experience. And I agree. I think it's important to get as much experience. And again, like I said, work in places where you know you're going to get the ability to learn and take control. I think you learn that quickly. And I know Siyun was my TA. And the other thing we said is, you know, don't be afraid to ask people for things.
Oh yeah, right, yeah. And especially I was such a shy student because I think first was also my language, the language barrier. I wasn't really confident to ask a question to the teacher, students, or ask for the help. But yeah, when I asked Gloria if I can be her TA for her class, she was like welcoming me, and because of that experience, it like really made me to like, you know, be more like
Confident.
more, yeah, to speak more and to be confident. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask questions to anyone, especially when you're a
And
student. You have the
yeah,
privilege to ask questions as a student.
well, I'm sure that's what your students are going to ask you now. And I think you've been inspiring, and I think it really shows anyone who is in the graphic design department can see what a great teacher you will be because of your experience as a student here, and now your experience as what I would consider a well-seasoned designer already. And you know, it was very impressive to see, you know, after such a short period of time, the kind of projects you've been working on and what you were able to do. I congratulate you, and I encourage everyone to take your class.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you again, and thank you everyone for coming. Again, you've been very inspiring. I really appreciate our lectures. It takes a lot of work to put this together, and it takes a lot of work on our staff here and at the GX department to put this together. And we'll see you next term for some other wonderful lectures. So always look at HMCT and the GX department for what's coming up next. And good luck with the rest of the semester for students who are here. Thank you. Thank you, Sia.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.